What's the most WTF thing you've ever heard someone casually admit like it was totally normal? 1. I worked at the airport where my shift lead couldn't get security clearance while they reviewed her pending court case, as she had been indicted for a crime and was awaiting trial. I asked her what could she possibly have a felony charge out on her for. She kept making a sandwich for a customer as she said my ex-boyfriend got rid of a guy and I was involved. I said damn, but you just knew him and that's why, right? You didn't do anything wrong? Naively seeing the best in her, she said nope. I helped roll him up in a carpet and we drove up to XYZ's and dropped him in the woods. I don't remember much of it. I'm getting charged. The way she said it was such confidence, like it was just another thing she was mentioning to me at work. Wow. Ended up looking up the story and it was fully true. 2. Elderly man casually points out the window of the bus. See that building over there? That was the first bank I robbed. Turns out he'd just spent 20 years in prison for robbing a half-dozen banks. I asked him what he spent his money on, and he'd buy expensive vintage cars and take them to the auto shop where my dad used to work. I'm pretty sure his tips are what paid for my new bike one Christmas. 3. My mother-in-law's boyfriend mentioned at a gathering that he was one of 10 kids and they were really poor. So sometimes for fun they would tie up their younger sister and sprinkle crumbs on her, and wait for the mice to crawl all over her and listen to her scream. He told it like a funny story. No remorse or sense that it was wrong to do that. 4. I was visiting a friend at her college in the city in a not-so-good neighborhood and we were in her dorm room, about 7 stories up. I was standing by her window and looking down at a parking lot below. One solitary guy was standing around out there, and within what felt like seconds another guy runs up to him and grabs him. I said to her, hey, it looks like a guy is getting mugged down there. Then I see one of them take out a weapon. I'm like, Jesus, a guy just got hurt. And she just shrugged and said, yeah, it's a bad neighborhood. Happens a lot. 5. Had a coworker blurt out that he kept his son's scholarship for housing at law school. He laughed that his kid didn't even know he won the scholarship and he was going to be a lawyer anyway, so he'd make enough money to pay school loans. We were speechless. 6. An acquaintance told me a story from his past. He was in the process of getting a divorce, but he didn't want to pay child support for his 3 kids. So he had his friend start spiking her drinks so she would fail a future custody panel test and also lose her job as a teacher. She ended up getting addicted, went into a tailspin, and disappeared for about 20 years until she finally got clean and turned her life around. This guy was still proud of causing his kids to grow up without their mother in their lives. 7. He and his brother had multiple children in Vietnam with multiple people during the war and pretty much refused and avoided contact. They were just chatting with the family casually during a get-together, and the talk eventually turned to the war. One of the other uncles said something like, you have a couple of kids over there, right? And he nodded, and his brother nodded, and they spent a couple of minutes just casually talking about this.